In this lesson, we'll create an animated camera rig. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is figure out where we want our camera to start and go ahead and create that camera. So I'll just go ahead, we'll drop the camera in, and I'm going to go ahead and go into that camera's coordinates and zero out its rotation values here. So everything's going to be at 0. It's as if it's just looking directly at the shot, kind of the same way the front camera or the front view does. So if I look through that, you can see we have no rotation whatsoever. And that's because I want to define my rotation through my rig. So to create the rig, I'll come up here to my primitives, drop in a null, and we'll call this camera rig. And then drop our camera underneath it in the hierarchy. So I only want to use my camera to zoom in or out or kind of move around up or down, side to side, but I do not want to rotate. So you can just take your finger off of the control button for rotating, because you want to be really careful that you don't do that by accident. Or excuse me, the Alt key. So what we can do now is grab our camera rig null and rotate that. So you can see how this now gives us rotation. It almost looks like everything is being rotated, but it's actually the camera. So what we're doing, if we actually go out of our camera view and kind of zoom backwards here, you can see that the null object is located right there on the side of the graph. Now if we grab the camera rig and I start to rotate, you can see how I'm rotating the rig and the camera is moving along with that. So with that in mind, I want to actually move the null object a little bit. So what I'll do is actually grab the enable axis, because I don't want the camera to move from the middle, and I'm going to move the actual axis to the middle of the graph. Then we'll just unenable that. And now when I rotate, you can see that it's rotating to the middle of the graph rather than the side. And this is the motion that I was going for right here. I kind of want to start out on the far left and be kind of following along with this line as it starts to come into view. So let's look back through our camera. And that actually looks really nice right there. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit further and maybe move down a little bit like this. And if we come back here to the very beginning, you can see kind of how that starts. So what I'll do is set a keyframe for my camera rig and camera right here. So camera rig will set a key at that rotation right here of -70. We'll grab the camera and we want to set keyframes for all 3 of its position axes. Okay, so then as we come down here, what I'd like to do is grab the camera rig and we'll rotate this around a little bit. But I also want to zoom in a little bit as well. So it looks like on the camera, it kind of changed that position a little bit. But because I didn't set a key for the rotation, you'll see that it looks a little bit strange. So what I'd like to do is actually have this rotated out to where I'm happy with it by about frame 60. So it happens a little more gradually than doing it exactly both on frame 30. So I'll go back to the camera rig and let's just bring this back down to 0. And we'll key that there. And by this time, I want to be zoomed out from the graph. And we can put that kind of back in the middle here. And we need to set a keyframe for our position if that's where we really want to take this. So I'll just go into my camera and set those keys on the position. Very nice. And then what I'd like to do as this kind of continues out and you give people time to read it, let's actually kind of rotate down a bit. So what we'll do is set a keyframe right here on frame 60. We've already got one for the height, but I'm also going to set one for the pitch. And then we'll come it down here to 90, frame 90. And I'm going to kind of rotate this around like that. Okay, and then we'll set those two keys. I'm also going to go into the camera, and by this point I want this to be up a little bit more like that, and we'll key those two positions in the X and the Y. So let's just hit play and see what it looks like. Okay, so not bad, but it's a little bit too extreme for me there at the end. I think I would rather have it look a little bit more, maybe just like this, just a very subtle movement. So what I can do is go into my camera, set some keys on that frame, go into my camera rig, set some keys there as well, and then we'll just overwrite them. So I'll just grab the key that I wrote, drag it to frame 90, switch over to the camera, and do the same thing. So now it's just going to move much less when it gets there to the end. Very nice. So now that feels a lot less kind of jarring by it going so quickly. So that's a really nice camera move that we've set up, and I love the way it follows along with that graph. Now we still need to get the rest of those percentages done, so I can finish that up for you in between lessons, but everything else's animation is looking really nice. However, whether or not it is a piece that we want to see, you can see how these pieces down here with the swing animation are all visible at the beginning, and then once they kind of swing down here, we don't really notice. It's very obvious that they were always there and they just kind of swing down. So I really don't like the way that that looks. So what we need to use is a visibility tag, which is going to go in and on all of these dates, not have them actually appear until they start to swing down. Now I also have a little bit of a problem with when that swinging actually occurs, because now that we've added the camera motion, we need to change the timing of this a little bit. So let's come back in the next lesson, edit the timing slightly for the dates and the title now that we have this set up a little bit better with our camera rig. And then we can also begin adding display tags to make everything look a little bit more polished.